Hello, guys. Welcome back to Woman Up with me, your host, Charl, and
Me, your other host, Lauren. Yay!
so we're going straight in there with a hard launch on,
Hard
on the
launch.
obvious fact that Lauren is now also a co-host. So, welcome to your own podcast, Lauren.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here. Maybe you should explain how this even came about.
Yeah. So basically, long story short. I mean, you guys should all be a fly on the wall of our WhatsApp conversations because they've been fantastic. So obviously, those of you that have listened to the podcast that Lauren and I did together on the American election, you'll be aware of who Lauren is. And basically, we have been chatting about being on the same lines with feminine. Whoa, goodness me! I'm getting all excited.
You're just so excited
That was
for me
my
to be here.
coffee. About feminist issues, things that affect women, for quite a few months now, and we've both been kind of we want to do something. We just want to platform this stuff. We want to move in this direction. I think neither of us really kind of knew what that looked like, and I think we kind of had a bit of a conversation. We went away, and then kind of were working on little things and thinking about what direction we could go in. And I thought, for me, the change was the American election. I thought I'm just gonna start talking about stuff on a podcast. We started talking again, right? You'd had the same idea,
Literally,
and then
exactly the same. I was going to start a podcast called Woman's Splaining. And we
so literally on the same track. And then I think we just obviously were chatting more about all of these things, and we thought, you know what, rather than going separately doing the same thing, let's just come together and make some impact and actually platform this
make
shit for
something
women.
magical. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And we share a lot of the same kind of outlook and opinions and values, and we just have been going so back and forth so many times it just made sense to team up.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, I'm currently. You're like, oh, spill my coffee, and I'm like, coffee. It's 5:30, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm in Thailand.
Yeah, not jealous at all, considering we've just come out of what, a 3-day storm here. Horrendous, and I'm literally full of cold, as you can probably hear. I've got a glass of vitamin C, so I couldn't be more winter, and you couldn't be more summer.
It's 30 degrees. It's boiling. I'm absolutely loving it. It's so good. I'm definitely like a summer bunny.
Yeah,
Born on
I
winter.
think I 100% am the same. When I spend time in LA, I'm just this is the life. Just being able to be by the sea in the nice weather, it just changes your whole
Yeah.
headspace.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we
Amazing.
bonded over as well, like America, California, Disney.
Yeah.
So, yay. So this is our first episode of us together as Woman Up together. And it's a belter.
We're going straight in there
Yeah,
with, as you probably seen from the title.
yeah, yeah, because I think, like we agreed, it's so important that if we're going to do this podcast, we need to start by explaining what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I've had clients ask me, what is patriarchy? What is that P word that you in your post? Not even sure what it is at all. And then I've got clients who are like, I don't really get it. So it's good to start, obviously, a podcast explaining what the hell we're even going to be talking about. So this episode is all about what patriarchy actually is, how it kind of developed, how it's evolved, how it impacts us, why we should give a shit. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a massive light bulb for a lot of people.
Yeah, because I think, and as obviously we'll go through so much in this podcast, it's something that it hides in plain sight. So you don't notice it until you notice it, and then you notice it everywhere. And yeah, hopefully as you guys listen to this, you'll kind of go, oh shit, yeah, various times as we talk about these things.
Yeah, that could have been a good podcast title. Oh shit, yeah, because that is
Oh
the aim.
shit.
That's the aim, is to get people to have these light bulb moments and relate it to their own lives and see how it shows up for them, and then can actually do something about that.
Yeah, 100%. Because we know with anything with coaching related, even you have to have the self-awareness first before you can actually take action and make change. And then, I don't know about you, I think, again, we've chatted about this a little bit, with working in the fitness industry, and we'll touch on women's health, body image, that kind of thing, so much comes back to patriarchy, ingrained beliefs. So much of our belief system is defined by patriarchy, because it's all we've really ever known as women.
Yeah, because it's all we've ever known, we don't know that we know it, but we're so in it, and that's why we're doing the podcast, to be taking the ball off the eyes, or whatever, showing people what it is. You know, ignorance is not bliss here. Like, wake up.
Yeah, literally the definition of being woke. Open your eyes and wake up.
Yeah, so I guess we should start off with the obvious, is literally the definition of what patriarchy is.
So, when I googled this, the most straightforward definition that I could come up with, it was a summary, is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from that.
Yep. And I have it manifests in institutions, cultural practices, personal relationships, where authority and leadership are predominantly male-dominated, and women, transgender, and non-binary people often face marginalisation or oppression. Mm-hmm. Basically, men rule the roost, and men have the power, and inheritance passes to men, and so forth.
Yeah, and I think when we say that, people might go, "Oh, well, that's not true. Like, women aren't oppressed in our society anymore, or we don't live in that kind of society." And it is probably not as straight. You might think, "Oh, well, just because we aren't maybe as oppressed as certain other nations, it's not the case." But hopefully, as we go through this, you will see how systemically women are so held back in so many ways. I actually saw, I've saved it, I'm going to read it, a TikTok. Let me just...
I mean, that's a great source of information.
But it was an analogy, not a definition. Yeah. So this just it just kind of resonated with me. So an analogy that patriarchy is like a man having a boot on a woman's neck. Feminism is a woman complaining about the boot. Conservatives insist there wasn't a problem with the boot being on the neck until the woman started talking about it. If she would just be quiet about having the boot on her neck, there wouldn't be a problem. And that's kind of what we live with, right? It's the invisible boot.
And it's invisible to a lot of people who have the boot on their neck. Hence, this episode is to show you, like, the boot is very much on your neck. If you're listening to this, it's likely on your neck. Like, and we will talk about the groups and the people that it, specifically impacts, because it also does impact men as well. And that's really important that we kind of talk about a few of the misconceptions around what patriarchy is, because a lot of people hear that and they hear feminism and things like that, and they just instantly think it's just a bunch of man-hating women, or women trying to tear down men, and women just trying to take power from men. And it's like, it's literally not that. Like, it's a misconception that it's only hurting women. And yeah, we've got it here, like, misconception is patriarchy only hurts women, but actually, while it disproportionately harms women, it limits men's emotional and behavioural expression, contributing to issues like toxic masculinity and mental health problems. And we see this in the suicide rates of men. Like, it's glaringly obvious. Like, men are struggling living in a patriarchal society as well. Patriarchy only positively impacts a certain type of man.
Yeah, if we think about, like, a patriarchal... who you think of when you think of a patriarchal society and the men that fit into that structure, it's the alpha male, it's the men that don't talk about their emotions, it's the provider, it's all of these tags that we attach to those people that actually are what pile the pressure on men. They are maybe the men who are not speaking up when they're working hours and hours and hours that they can't actually, they're overwhelmed trying to provide, and they feel like it makes them less than to ask their partner for help. Or, if they get in after a long day, they're not going to cry to their wife and show emotion and be in touch with their more feminine side, quote unquote, to offload that sort of emotion. They're going to internalise that. And like you say, that then comes out as the increased male suicide rates. And I think the misconception that I see a lot of is like, that women cause those male suicide rates, like that, women put this pressure on men to provide. It's a systemic issue. It's the societal expectation of men in a patriarchal system puts that pressure on men, and it's just as sad for men. Obviously, we can see that in data. And I saw a good thing actually online, and it was a man saying, like, typically, if you think about it, like, women, when they go through a hard time mentally, they turn to books or their friends. And it's like men tend to lean more towards fascism because it's kind of, they get frustrated and they want to blame someone, and that's usually where more extreme beliefs and things tend to then come from.
Yeah, and like that post that I sent you the other day where I just stupidly went into the comments and, it was talking about, the post was talking about the problems in statistics that men are facing, and in the comments it's all just like, yeah, because of women, and it's like, yeah, because of women, and women's rights, and men are bending over backwards for women these days, and all the blame was on the women, and it's like, hang on a second, like, yes, women are rallying together to empower each other, but they're not tearing down men. Men's issues are coming from being in a patriarchal society which was founded and continues because of men.
Yeah, 100%. And then that's, again, that second kind of misconception that feminists want more rights than men. They want to just, they're against men, they hate men. And this is something that we discussed, right, with actually coming together with this, is that we don't want men to listen to this podcast and go, oh, it's knickers and bras at dawn, and they're just being horrible about men. Like, that's not what feminism is. And actually, we'd hope that any man that chose to listen to this would be an ally, and that would actually be like, oh shit, wow, I didn't register that either. And I can say that as, like, and we've spoken about this, like, my partner is one of those people, like, that I'll expose kind of more patriarchal things, go like, that's an example of patriarchy or whatever, and he's so open-minded to that. Like, he's like, God, I need to talk about that more, or he'll call out his friend, or he'll do. And so there is people that are open to this, and the more men that vocalize that, the more normal among men that can become.
Yeah, exactly. We're not man hating, and I was saying this to you, like, as a lesbian, it's like I instantly can get brushed as, you're just a man hater. You just hate men because I'm a lesbian and I date women, and it's like, that's literally not the case at all. Like, whether I was straight or not, like, I still believe in equal rights for everybody. That is including men. Feminism is not about women surpassing anybody else or anybody. It's full equal rights for everybody.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
We're not hating on them. And I don't know if you've done the Dan Osman episode yet, which...
No. So again, like, we are going to go into this particular point in more detail, because I'm going to be chatting to Dan, who talks a lot about this stuff on social media, but through his own coaching practice as well, with the kind of demographic that he works with. So we are really going to... And I thought he'd be a great guy to talk about that, because of that's the kind of content that he shares, but he is also a dad. He's a girl dad as well. So I think when you're in that position, when you are, he works in the fitness industry, which, let's be honest, is quite patriarchal and is quite misogynistic and all of that. He has done a really good job at, like, being incredible at what he does, being successful in his business, but not subscribing to that. And actually then his kind of juxtaposition as, business owner, fitness industry, but as a dad to a young girl. Oh, sorry, Siri just started talking to me. I think is a really interesting place for him to be. So yeah, that's coming up it'll go live after this one, but we're going to record that in the next couple of weeks. So I'm really, really excited for that.
Yeah, and I listened to a really good podcast actually not too long ago that was about, it basically connected emotionally immature people, EIPs, and like patriarchally socialized men. And it was a man doing the podcast. It was a man saying all of these things. It wasn't a woman hating on men or whatever. And just drawing the link between the two was so interesting to listen to. And I think, again, like, getting down on the podcast early doors is such a good idea, to be like, this is how patriarchy is affecting men too. And, like, 100%. We do need men. If there's going to be change and there's going to be equal rights, we need the other 50% of the population to help us out. Yeah. Like
the analogy.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, oppressed people need the non-oppressed people to help. Like, we're trying to claw our way up an uphill, slippery fucking slope. And they just keep putting fairy liquid down it. That's what I'm imagining. Like, slide, and we're just like, help us. And they're like, yeah, fairy liquid.
Slosh right down. Like, the analogy that I think of, and this is the same with anything, whether it's like, changing systemic things, whether it's sexism, misogyny, race, anything, like, the people that are oppressed are behind the door, but, like, the allies need to open the door. We can only knock as loud as we can. Like, someone has to open the door. So people on the inside, quote unquote, have to be on board to make the change. And unfortunately, as we know, and we'll go on to, like, because of this historical patriarchal ingrained system, unfortunately, a lot of the people in positions of power to make change are men. Yeah. So it's kind of, that's where we can shout as loud, as we can. But if people in those positions aren't willing to support us to make change, it's not going to happen.
I'm visualizing, like, it used to be like a little knocker, then a big knocker, and now it's like a ring doorbell, and they can fucking see us out there. Like that's where we're at right now. Like we're on the ring
Yeah.
doorbell, and they can see us, and we're like, hey. And it's either a lot of men are like your partner and are seeing it, and they're like, oh my god, yes, this needs a change. And a lot of men are going the other way and be like, don't let them in. They're trying to, oppress us and take away our power. That's obviously
I think
doing so well for us.
that's what's scaring me. Like a side note, just while we're talking about this, is you feel like it's going the right way, and like it is like, oh, as we've spoken about with various things, like with each generation, we just feel like we improve and we become more open-minded, and then something that was taboo is now just normal because we're on the right side of history. Like we think that's how it goes. But I think what's really kind of destabilizing me is the rise of the kind of extremism on the other side that's pushing back now, which I feel like we haven't seen as much of until recent years, with the rise of things like, men and podcasts and, that kind of thing. And these kind of really, and then, presenting so much misinformation as fact and kind of gearing these young men up. When I really fear that, like, young men that I say, like teenagers now, are potentially going to be fed all of this and then not keep progressing in the right direction. And that scares me, because I'm like, that they're so at that age when they aren't, very, very well educated, they're still learning, they're still kind of finding their way in the world, so impressionable. It's so hard for that generation to tell the difference between what's right and wrong on social media. Like, it's so easy to influence that generation. And it's, I don't know how we...
Yeah, absolutely. And like
that.
Little girls are raised to have the boot on the neck, and little boys are raised to put their boot on the neck without questioning it, without realizing, without knowing. That's just how they are raised, because it's how we're all brought up. I like that boot analogy, and so they're being raised in that way. And then now it's like, okay, let's look at the role models that we now have on social media that are like blowing up. And I think Trump coming into power has just been like an absolute massive kick in the vag, because this is who is leading the most powerful country in the world. This is who boys have to look up to and how to treat women, and this is what success and power looks like. And
do what you want. You can just do what you want and be in the best position in the world.
And 70 million people will vote for you because they don't give a shit. And it's just, it's a massive statement from a lot of people. So rightfully concerned about what the future holds as far as patriarchy stuff. But I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on, about what's going on in the positives and the negatives. But I wanted to kind of touch on so if we live in a patriarchal society, what would be the alternative? Is there like an opposite? Where do we go? Okay, so you don't want a patriarchal society. What do you want? Just Disneyland, to be honest. Just a lot of Disney. But on the flip side of the coin would be like a matriarchal or a matrilineal society, where the mother would pass down inheritance to the daughter, and the mother rules the household, and women are in more positions of power and in positions of politics and finance and law and tech and all of these things that we currently see more men in. And there's pretty much there is no country on earth that is a matriarchal society. There's a few indigenous groups across Asia and North America, like a few groups. I think something like 60-something groups, and I was looking it up, where it's patriarchal, but for the most part it's still patriarchal. But there are places like Scandi countries, Nordic countries, that do have more equality between men and women and see more women in these like gender stereotype male roles. And the statistics coming out of those countries are like better health, better like peace, better
people are happier.
People are happier. Like they're just thriving countries. And it's like, okay, so if you don't want a patriarchal society, what do you want? Is there evidence that there is a better alternative? Yes, there actually is.
And the irony is that a lot of these, like when you look at politics, right, and a lot of what I'll say is like kind of people or men, let's say, with far right beliefs, so they're like, and we should be running the country like this and doing this and that. When they're comparing our country to, I don't know, say talking about something like, you know, like such and such is immigration, or like such and such is this, or insert other belief here, it's usually, and they probably don't realise it, they compare to a female-led country. like Finland or New Zealand, and they are all these kind of like their examples of how we should be doing it, and they're pulling our government down. And it's like, little do you know, they have female prime ministers, and like actually, like, you know, their whole system functions better, their taxes are higher, but they have better policing, they're safer, they're cleaner, like
less
all of
male
this
violence.
stuff works well for everybody, not just for females. And I think when, again, just out of interest, you know, if you ever done these stuff where you Google something, you see how different stuff comes up. Like when you Google men's safety wear, it comes up with like high vises, but you Google female safety wear, it comes up with like pepper spray. So I Googled like benefits of a matriarchal society, benefits of a patriarchal society. So in a matriarchal society, power is distributed more equitably among individuals, with an emphasis on collaboration, empathy, and nurturing relationships. Everybody benefits. The benefits listed of a patriarchal society is that males automatically have certain advantages, including a freedom from fear of being raped, sexually assaulted, or from experiencing job discrimination based on their gender. So that is literally, by definition, a patriarchal society only benefits men, and matriarchal society benefits society.
Everyone. Yes, exactly. It's like, how did we get to this place? Which I guess we can go into, because we've got like a little timeline, but like, how did it get to this point if we know now? Like, there's not a ton of research and evidence because there is no matriarchal places to research. But like we've just said, these Scandinavian countries, where they are more equal, there's so much like good coming from these countries. And I've got here, there's also research suggesting that female leadership styles, often associated with more collaborative and consensus building approaches, can have a positive effect on social outcomes, especially in terms of conflict resolution and peace building. So literally less war.
National security.
Just like less war. So like that's
because let's be honest, it's like when you think about things like war, it's like, oh, usually this male leader got really angry about this thing, so he just decided to weaponize loads of his people to fight for him. Like, and it's unfortunate reality of, like people's egos, people dick swinging, figuratively. Like, but we do tend to see, when we bring the kind of joke of it back, that is it. Like, the female leaders will say, like, how can we resolve this for the best outcome for both parties, which, as we said, is not women want a matriarchal society to trod down men. That is not the outcome that we see in evidence.
No, I completely feel that like an empowered man would be a feminist.
Yeah, no, 100%.
An empowered man wants equality for everybody. An empowered man wants a good life for him and other men. But again, like this is the point of the podcast, is to teach people about the boot on the neck, whether they are under it or holding the boot, because a lot of men, I don't think, also realise the impact that, or the benefits that they get from patriarchy. Because if you're just living blissfully in ignorance like throughout your life and never struggling, why would you be aware of it?
Yeah, and I also think sometimes that by highlighting that they're aware of it, they feel like they are taking the blame. Whereas that's not the case. Like, you can absolutely we have it with all different things, right? Whether it's patriarchy, whether it's white privilege. Like, we can be, like, I know you and I can speak for you and I, like the least racist people, and want equality for everybody, whether it's race, sex, anything. But we can acknowledge that we have benefited from white privilege. It's the same thing with patriarchy. And again, I see this in Dougie. Like, he will be like, yeah, shit, like, I benefit from that on a fucking daily basis. You know, like I can acknowledge that without it being like, I'm doing something wrong. It's two separate things. And you have to be able to acknowledge the benefit that you have of, you know, I was talking about like the gender pay gap, and he was like, no way, like, that's not a thing. I was like, no, it is a thing. And it's like, to not even like have to worry about that going for a job, like, that's a privilege that you didn't even realize that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great comparison, like, because we are privileged by being white, and we can recognize that. And it's like, yeah, that's because we live in a racist system and society, just as we live in a patriarchal system and society is what we live in. And it's not pointing the finger at an individual type of person. Like, it's the system that we live, and you can decide whether or not you want to partake and be ignorant, or if you want to try and help the people that are in those oppressed minorities.
Yeah, but basically, are you going to be an Elphaba or are you going to be a Glinda?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We need more alphabets.
Yeah, we need more alphas rather than protecting your own place within it because that's where you're currently thriving.
Yeah, I guess the comparison would be. Do you remember when everybody was saying like white lives matter too? The comparison to that is like not all men.
Yeah.
And the same people that say white lives matter too are the same people saying not all men, and taking it very personally. Like
by platforming the oppressed, we're not taking anything away from you by making sure people are equal.
Yeah, do you know how many times I've had somebody say to me like, "Oh, well, we don't get a straight pride," and it's always a white man. That's like, why do you get? Yeah, like a handful of times, but like enough to be like, why would you get? Like, why would you have that?
You've always been able to kiss your partner in the street and not be lynched for it. Like
they don't realise that every day for them is celebrated.
Yeah,
like,
when's Men's Day? Every day.
yeah, every single day of your life, man. But like, then they're like, yeah, but we've got issues too, and men struggle too, and then yes, because you live in a patriarchal society, and we do full circle.
Yeah, so, and again, like we are absolutely not diminishing that because we know, again, as we said at the start, because of these issues that we're talking about, male suicide rates, all of that stuff, like we want to obviously make space for that as well, and it doesn't have to blow that candle out to light another one. Like things can coexist, and there's enough dialogue for everything, but we do have to look at the fact that it's kind of completely disproportionate when not suicide specifically, but when we zoom the lens out to a bigger picture. Like, you know, I think about like people do the whataboutism as well with domestic violence, and they're like, well, you know, like the whataboutism, like the comparison with like domestic violence, and they're like, well, women do it to men too. It's like, yes, but it's something like 92% is male on female domestic violence, or something like 92% happens to women, and like 99% of that is perpetrated by men. So it's either man on man or man on woman.
Yeah,
you know, similarly to like grape, I'll say for the benefit of the podcast and not using that term, but like it's heavily biased in one side. So it's not that we're like not saying it doesn't happen to men, but you can't ignore that if we obviously we don't want this, but if we removed men from the equation, it probably wouldn't happen anywhere near as frequently.
Yeah, exactly. So when men try and use the defense of like, well, it happens to us too, it's like, by who? Like it's still
no, exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we should like touch on how patriarchy actually does impact people, so that you can like kind of look at what's going on and how. And when I started writing out like how we're impacted by patriarchy, well, like it just goes on. It goes on, and I've not even scratched the surface, to be honest, with like how much it actually impacts us. But I'm going to dive in. We're going to start at the top and just work our way through. So
take a big deep breath.
So, how does patriarchy impact us in today's society? Starting with the workplace and the gender pay gap, which if people try to argue against, can just please stop. But not only the gender pay gap, but the pension gap as well. I literally, like, when I worked at a gym, there was me and two guys, and I was more qualified than both of them, and I had more experience than one of them. And one of them was getting terrible feedback on all of his classes, and I was getting like filled classes and great feedback. So after a while, I asked my boss for a pay rise because I found out that the boys were being paid £3.50 an hour more than I was. Both of them, they were on equal pay, and I was on like £3.50 less per hour. And I asked him if I could be given a raise, and I said all the reasons why. I said like all the positives, you know, fought my case, and he laughed in my face. He just laughed in my face. I was like, no, you're going to have to do more than that if you want a pay rise. And I literally was like, and at this point I didn't know about, you know, gender pay gaps and patriarchy and stuff. I was like 22, I think. And that was just like my first experience of that in the workplace.
Yeah, that is outrageous.
Yeah, and also I had another boss that told me to stop wearing soccer shorts and wear leggings because it showed my legs off better to wear leggings. Yeah.
Oh my God. So you know what? So this is probably the area that I have had. I say that actually with like the fitness industry. I guess we can talk about that. We both have experience with that. But in my workplaces, I've been quite beneficially surrounded by women. So prior to being self-employed, my very first job was in. Do you remember Mothercare?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my mum worked for Mothercare since it started, and then me and my sister both did as well. So again, working with women, with mums, and then I went into merchandising with Victoria's Secret. So I was with women, working with women. I was just constantly surrounded by women, or a lot of gay lads. So we all had like quite similar viewpoints on stuff, like, and I've not really been exposed to that kind of structure where, there will be like males in the workforce as well, in kind of like a generic kind of perspective. My first experience of that was probably coming into the fitness industry and feeling like I have to absolutely kill myself to be heard and listened to, and scrolling through social media, seeing men making 5, 6, 7 times more than I am, that can just say what they want and be believed. Like that kind of difference in the workplace or like in business. Mm-hmm. It's women have to be overqualified and have tons more experience to even be remotely equal to their male counterpart.
We have to fight and work twice as hard to be seen half the amount, basically.
And even be believed. Like,
there was that statistic that I saw ages ago, and it was something like a woman won't apply for a job unless she thinks she's 95% qualified, or somewhere around that, whereas a man will apply for a job when he's like 30-something% qualified. I haven't looked at that statistic in ages, but I remember reading that and being like, holy shit, that still rings so true between me and like all my friends when they're like, oh, I don't know. And actually with clients as well. So like I do coach men, and when I have a new male client and I ask like their experience, their current fitness levels, and they have always overhyped themselves. By the time I kind of come to their first session, I'm like, okay, so they're not actually where they said they were as far as fitness and strength and everything. I'm like, that's fine. I don't need men to not overhype themselves. I need women to overhype themselves more, because every single female client I've had, which has been a lot over 10 years, has put themselves down. Oh, I'm not that fit. Oh, I'm not very good. I'm not too good at this. Or I don't really know. Like, and then they are like amazing, or no problems whatsoever, and I'm like, why we're so ingrained into putting ourselves down unless we're absolutely perfect, and it is exhausting.
Definitely. And that I see that as well in clients as well, exactly the same trend of like just underestimating, like downvaluing themselves. And it's a trait that will not just show up in the area we work with them in, it'll be a trait that'll show up in every area of their lives. I think it's there in terms of the actual black and white, like you say, of actually the gender pay gap, but it's there in terms of actually being respected and seen as equal in the workplace in ways you can't measure either.
Oh, and like lack of women in like specific roles, like leadership roles, and in tech and in more politics. There's so many fields where women just are underrepresented massively, and I've seen men argue it like, well, they should just apply for the job then, and it's like, or it's because they went to go have a baby and they blame the woman, and I'm like, you're missing the bigger picture here of like how is she going to go and have a baby and then go back to work? Because that's a whole other thing on its own. But
also it's not seeing it, like you'll know, like from being a young girl, like you can't visualize yourself to then work towards something if you can't see yourself in it. So like I know when I was younger, like I wouldn't have even thought of like, oh, I could do that, because there were no women doing it. So like you don't think that you're not aware that you're thinking that. You're not aware that you're holding yourself back. Your brain doesn't even go there, because women don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. I played football as a kid, and having a career in football was not a thing for women. So in my mind, it was never a thing for me. Like now, obviously, it is a career for women. I mean, the talk about gender pay gap, oh my God, like male footballers getting paid something like £100,000 a week, and women are not even getting that a year. Anyway, separate topic that I'll rant and rave about another time, I'm sure. But it wasn't there to see. Like there was an England team, but it was like, not. They were still all had full-time jobs. So I never aspired as a kid to be. Yeah, it was just a hobby. So I never aspired to be a full-time footballer, because it just wasn't a thing then.
Yeah. that's the thing, it starts there. So when men say things that just apply for it, it's like, this started when we were 3. You know what I mean? Like it's that constant ingrained. And I always used to think about it with, like, again, going back to when I worked in Mothercare, it was only when I was working there. So what, I'm 30, nearly 32. So I was like 16 when I started working there. It was only in my lifetime that they started creating little boys' toys that were like cleaning carts and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, even when I started there, it was like the cleaning cart was pink and it was in the girls section. And it's all that stuff that is what starts that patriarchal thought process of, well, you have, as a little girl, you're bought a pram and you're bought a doll and you're brought a cleaning cart, and the little boys have brought cars, and and that is all just this constant feed of setting them up for the future.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's called son preference, where a society or a family, whatever, would prefer to have a son, and that is global. That is everywhere. And, in some countries it's more obvious, places like China, where they literally would throw baby girls in rivers, or they malnourish them so that they die. Because say a family can't afford to send 2 children into education, they're going to pick the son. If they can't afford to raise children, they're going to pick the son. And there is this son preference everywhere. No, people in England are not, malnourishing little girls to death. But I have literally heard men say, like, that they're disappointed that they're having a girl and not a boy, or like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to take her fishing or play football with her or whatever. And there's like that disappointment tone that it's a girl. I've seen that. Like, you probably all have seen that. Or dad saying, I really want a son, I really want a boy. That is literally right there already disrespecting and disregarding your little girl, and already putting her down. Like, as soon as a girl is born, or as soon as we know that a woman is pregnant with a girl, that life is worth less than had it been a boy. That's sad as fuck.
It is really sad. And I remember, like, that actually happened to so my dad's mum said that to my mum and dad when she so obviously we've got me, who was the oldest, and I've got a younger sister. When they found out that my mum was having another girl, she actually said, because she had all boys, she was like, "You've disappointed me again." She said that to my dad.
God, it's not even, it's everywhere. And I think people listen probably all come up with their own, like, stories of where they've heard, like, I wish it had been a boy, or I want a boy, or things like that.
And even things like, oh, I want a boy so, like, my family name can continue on. It's like, that's a system that we have just curated. Like, we can choose to unsubscribe from that at any time. Like, it's completely irrelevant now. We don't pass ownership of a woman from her father to her husband anymore. Like, it's just these weird things that we have just decided to do and continue that as a society that are no longer relevant. But that, I've heard people say that, like, recently, like, yeah, I want my family name to continue. It's like, well, your son might turn around and say, I'm taking my wife's name, like a lot of people do now. Like, it's not a thing.
Yeah, but the wife's name still came from
her dad. Yeah,
her dad. So unless you create, like, a new name, or combine the names to create a new name, it's still on some level, like, passed down through the dad side.
Yeah, which is just crazy. Like, yeah.
That's so right. Yeah, so that's just about ticked off the workplace.
Anyway,
healthcare.
Second on the million agenda.
Second on the big agenda is healthcare. Like, this is a huge one, and how like misogynistic our healthcare system is. And again, it's not one that men would even know, because they're not sat in the doctor's office with women while they're being dismissed. Their pain is being ignored. We're not researched. I don't know the statistics, but it's way less than men. So, like, drugs are created based on how they'll work for men, not how they'll work for women, because we're seen as the anomaly. Our hormones are too crazy, so we'll just do tests on men. It's like, hun, we're 50% of the fucking population. We're not an anomaly. Like, get it together. And I think I read that it does cost more to, like, research on women, but it's like, then fucking do it. Because it's costing the NHS more by all these women coming in with, like, unknown symptoms and, like, still having mystery problems. And, like, I've literally got friends at the moment who have been trying to get a diagnosis for something for, like, over a year, and just being passed around and dismissed, ignored. Nobody knows what's going on. Like, that's not an uncommon thing for women to be just completely unheard and have to absolutely fight tooth and nail and advocate for themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was, we were excluded from any, like, research, large body research, till 1992, which is, like, our lifetime.
Literally.
Like the fact that we are taking drugs that there hasn't been a lifetime's worth of research on for females yet is wild. Like we've got self-driving cars in the world. Like what? Like we've got self-driving cars, but we don't know what's wrong with women's bodies. Like what the fuck? Like the money is there. It's just where you're putting it.
Oh, absolutely. There's rocket ships and men going up into space, and yet, we barely know what menopause is.
Yeah,
like
literally.
PCOS,
And I think that's where we're seeing it now in these really we've known about it. We've known there's been a gap in the healthcare system, but we can see it so clearly in these things now that they're becoming more prevalent. More women are becoming interested in. I've still got half of my life to go after I go perimenopausal. I want to live that. I'm going to do something about it. Whereas culturally, it was like, oh, well, you're over the hill when you're in perimenopause, so just crack on with it. You're less in society now, like off you go. Whereas women are now starting to say, no, I'm not. I'm not valued just because of my beauty or my external appearance. I'm not diminishing with age, so I'm going to actually live my life. And now we are starting to see those massive gaps, and probably something you see with clients as well. I've got quite a lot of perimenopausal clients. Of course, it's something I'm looking into for myself, because it's all going to happen to all of us. And even being able to get HRT first and foremost, but the comparison of if a man goes into the doctor's office with he can't get it up, or some kind of sexual dysfunction, he has access to Viagra on the NHS, like test and whatever, whereas it's not even just a pleasure thing for women. But women aren't going on HRT for sexual pleasure, they're going on HRT for their quality of life. Yeah, their mental health, but also to prevent their risk of things like heart disease, because actually going into menopause and having low estrogen puts them at higher risk of these things, osteoporosis, their actual health, not just if they can orgasm or not. So it's that disparity is huge. And then again, when we see the actual comparison, which would be, say, for example, a woman asking for HRT with testosterone because she wants to protect her sex life, quite rightly, quality of life, health, that would be the equal to men, but the NHS won't give you testosterone with your HRT. You have to get that privately. So why is female pleasure just not regarded at all for health, but men's is? That gap is just wild.
Oh, it's huge. And I know we're going to do a separate episode entirely on female pleasure and the orgasm gap and all of that, because again, it's just another massive disparity between men's issues are more important than women's. That is the system that we live in. It is the way of the world. Men matter more. And we're out here fucking paying tax on fucking pads and tampons and paying for that shit. And I'm if men had periods, there's no way in hell they'd be paying for products.
No. And there would be so much support in the workplace.
Yep. Oh, if they had agony, pain, and cramps, they'd be allowed to go home. And the thing, when you were talking about menopause as well, I was thinking women go through this massive change which can fundamentally impact every part of their life and have some serious side effects and symptoms, and they're still expected to show up as normal at work, nothing's happening, and just be completely just well, it's just what it is, because it's just a woman's problem.
Yeah, it's wild, and I see that on a limited level with because I have migraines, so I've been getting them since I was 11, and actually it wasn't until last year that, because I have got a very, very good GP who I actually went to and went, look, this is all the data I have collected and this is what I think, and she was like, you are right. When we looked at the timeline, she was like, this is PMDD. She's like, they started when your period started. They are worse around your cycles. It's not your only trigger, but they are worse. Your mood plummets. This is PMDD and we need to help you with that. And she took it seriously. And it's for how long, for my adult life until I was 32, it's I have probably a quarter of my month where it's I can't even see. And it's just no one would ever know, because you just fucking get on with it. You take a triptan and you get on with it. And it's mad that it's we're just functioning. We're just you just have to crack on, because what's the alternative? There's no research. There's no one's going to do anything about it. Which you can't help but feel when you are in that position. If this was the other way around, it would not be the case.
Absolutely. I've never discussed this on a podcast before, but my a family member passed away when I was about 8, and it was from cervical cancer, and she had gone to her male GP and was dismissed from her symptoms. And I have been told since, like, this story, now that I'm older, my mum has said, like, she begged her to get a second opinion, but she was like, no, they said it's fine. And she died a few months later. And I would just, like, in my heart of hearts, know that if we didn't live in a patriarchal society and have such a misogynistic healthcare system, that wouldn't have happened. So that is why, like, within my soul, I fucking fundamentally fight for this shit, because she would absolutely be here if it wasn't for that misdiagnosis and dismissal.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately more common than we think that these things just get overlooked, and it is women's lives that are literally just on the line here.
Yep.
And you know what? I saw a male gynecologist this year, and I was shocked. His bedside manner was amazing, and he shouldn't be the minority in terms of how he dealt with me. And he was like, "You call me for a repeat next year. You call me. I want to see you again. We'll keep an eye on this together." And he said to me, like in a similar situation, like a smear situation, he was like, are you wanting to have children? Is that on the cards for you, or is that something you're not bothered about? He wasn't like, you're of childbearing age, so
yeah, the assumption that you want children. Yeah.
And I said, well, not within the next few years. I will never say never, but not right now. And he was like, okay, cool. And then just carried on with whatever he was going to tell me about. But it's like, that shouldn't be the minority of doctors that are not making these assumptions, that are not, misogynistic or whatever. And it's like, I was taken aback because I was like, wow, that was a really nice interaction. But it's because I've had so many interactions with male gynecologists, etc., that have not been like that it's kind of like, that shouldn't be the case.
But again, it's like, it's their education. All of our education is in a patriarchal system, right? So even, non-GPs, non-doctors, whatever we're learning is still misogynistic. It's still in this patriarchal system. So these doctors are learning through the lens of patriarchy. So that is what they know, and that's what they think. And I would love to know, like, why was that gynecologist so different to the rest? Like, where did he go to school? Like,
who taught you?
Who taught you? Yeah, like, well, pass it on, because
yeah. But it's crazy.
Yeah. So I've probably not even got through healthcare yet. I've got autoimmune diseases in women, chronic stress and anxiety in women, just everything in healthcare is
touching on that, like, just briefly, because we've spoken about this together, haven't we, in terms of like autoimmune disease. And like, everybody I'm sure listening to this podcast will know somebody who either like has something like that, who has like been diagnosed with some kind of autoimmune disease, or things like unexplained infertility in healthy women, because we are not built as women to do everything. So it's kind of like this hard juxtaposition of like, we're kind of this rising generation that have got all these unexplained hormonal issues, and I guess like what we know about things like the HPO axis and menstrual cycle function, we know that like stress is horrific for our hormone health. But we are like the first generation of women that are like balancing the career, balancing being a mum, doing it all. And biologically, we're kind of not made to carry all of those plates. But then, and again, this is a lifelong like struggle that I have in my head, is like, well, the alternative to that is pushing me back into the system then. And I kind of don't want that either. So it's kind of like...
Yeah, exactly. Basically, fundamentally, the system needs to change to allow women to have more. And that also benefits men, because say for like example, like mums returning to work, dads need more leave. Dads need to take care of their own children as well. And dads want that. A lot of dads do want that. And they can't get it because it's just the system isn't built for that. And there's still so much discrimination against men staying at home watching the kids, or, mums going back into work. And I have had clients tell me of like, after they've had their first kid, it was a bit like rocky. Second kid, she said, like, it was really tough going back into work. And by the time she had her third one, they basically forced her out. Like, they were just like, nope. And all her male like colleagues had all just gone like up and up and up. And she just was completely dismissed and was like, yeah, just like stay home.
It's horrible. And that is the thing. It's like, you do sacrifice so much. to step out of the workforce and have a kid, because it isn't just the time off, it is the career progression, it's the, you know, childcare is so fucking expensive that actually, is it even worth going back full time? Because actually it costs you more than your salary to put them in childcare anyway. So it's like, it's
if you had a
whole
system that
thing.
had like free childcare, and when we see countries with free childcare, like those Scandinavian countries, they are thriving. Mums are getting back into work. Mums are sleeping more. Like they've got more time.
Yeah, and then, and again, like you say, men, a lot of men do want that, and again, men that are less kind of like, I need to provide, and they're like, no, it's okay for me to want to spend time with my children. That doesn't make me a lesser man. Again, men that don't want to conform to that patriarchal society because they realize they benefit from it. Like, you know, and again, this is a discussion I've had with my partner, who's like, if biologically I could do it for us, I would. He's like, but you know, I would have to take, say, 2 weeks off to physically recover. But he's like, if there is paternity there, I will take paternity and you can go back to work. Like, the people want this, so it's like we need to change the system to allow for options to be there. Otherwise, we are forced into a position where then we wonder why relationships break down. Again, men's mental health comes into that as well. Like, you know, it's going to benefit everybody to have a society where we can do what's best for both parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at our list to go through like how it still impacts us and how it shows up. We've got literally like reproductive rights, violence and harassment, finance, sex, body image, confidence, eating disorders, the media. Oh God, the media definitely needs to be its own episode on its own, and like how patriarchy shows up there. But I did definitely want to touch on some things in the media because this is a big one where you start noticing people have the biggest light bulb moments when you point out like misogyny and patriarchy in the media. And it's like the language that they use around men and women is shocking. When you see it, you're like, oh my God. And it's the way that they absolutely blame the victim almost like every time. So like, if a woman has been harassed or assaulted, when you see the headlines, it's like, what was she wearing? Or what was her job? Or like, what did she do wrong? And the Sarah Everard murder was huge in highlighting this, because she, quote unquote, did everything right. He was a police officer. Like, it was the first time that it was like, you cannot be blaming the victim. I mean, they can never blame the victim, but it was like, that was a turning point for like, actually look at the language being used here. And I've got it written down what the guy said. What was it? I just want to find it. Oh yeah. Where is it? I thought I'd written it down, but it was about what the police officer had said about Sarah Everard and how she should have been more like up to date on police etiquette or whatever. And like, he was immediately told to, you know, back down, but he basically went and did an interview and said like she didn't look after herself properly. And then there's things like, I read about this Canadian judge who said to a 19-year-old girl who'd been raped, if we're using that term, saying, couldn't she just keep her knees together? Yeah. And then the advice that he gave the boy that raped her, he said, I want you to tell your friends, your male friends, that they have to be more gentle with women, they have to be more patient, and they have to be careful, very careful, to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. So basically saying God, like it was her fault and that boys need to protect themselves and be careful because women are now going to say he's raped me. And you see this all the time.
And again, this whole narrative of like that women have made it up or whatever, and it's like, for the 2% of women that lie about,
I think it's
sexual assault, or it's like it's minute that lie. We are tarnishing the whole other 98%, by the way, of which there are more of, but because of that 2% that you are highlighting, the rest of them don't actually come forward because they're scared. So it's absolutely mind-blowing. And again, we've seen it in recent weeks, right, with the reporting of the Conor McGregor case. Like, again, same thing. And it's like, because I actually obviously studied this at uni 10 years ago, and there's still no fucking change in it. That like how discourse, how media use certain words, like you say, to blame without like, people wouldn't read those headlines and be like, oh yeah, they're blaming her. It's so subconscious. Like, you know, if you look at how there was literally like a headline that was, you know, Conor McGregor guilty of raping woman, and then her name. That's how that's the only way it should be reported.
Yeah.
with her name, what he did, black and white, he's been convicted. The other headlines, accuser of Conor McGregor wins trial.
Yeah, I've got one here. It says, Conor McGregor's rape accuser reveals why she was so confident that she would win civil lawsuit.
Because he raped her. Like, because she was fucking black and blue. Did you say they had to remove her tampon with forceps?
Oh.
Like, her team were like a gynecologist, the rape crisis team that she went straight to, and they said she presented physically in the physical abuse internally and externally, and psychologically the fact she was shaken and couldn't look anybody in the eye as a rape victim. She had doctors, gynecologists, the rape crisis team in the court with her, and his defence was, my mate and her mate said it was consensual. Like, the woman can present all of these things, and even the way, like, the things that have been omitted by the media. So, like, people will go, Conor McGregor's accuser paid $250,000 in damages. It's like, okay, so you're going to, basically, all of these misogynistic men are now going to go, oh, she accused him for the money. Okay, you've missed the 6 years prior to this, where she tried 4 times to take it to criminal court, but they wouldn't take it on because they don't take the majority of rape cases into criminal court because they can't go to criminal court because it's usually his word against hers. That's the problem with the system and rape and getting people for rape anyway. He also offered her a settlement of $1 million outside of court. And she said, no, I want you to take you to court and for you to be found guilty of what you did.
Yep. And she's going to have such backlash against doing that, which makes it like so much harder for other women to then want to come forwards. Like the whole
But even with
stuff.
that, the media have just omitted that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's I just feel like, and you know, when, I don't know if you saw Conor McGregor's wife then put a statement about her after the trial when he got found guilty, saying, I will warn my boys about women like you.
This is it. This is exactly it. It's the boot on the neck and not even fucking knowing it. It's absolutely.
And it's like, and she's saying things like a woman with kids at home, a married woman with kids at home going out and sleeping with it. Your husband has 4 kids at home who was also sleeping with her, cheating on his partner.
Yeah.
What you don't even realise you're doing it. You don't even realise that you're holding her to worse account. He can do what he wants. Doesn't matter that he's got 4 kids at home and he's got a partner. It's awful that she's done that because she's a mother.
We're taught like early on that boys will be boys. Boys can get away with what they want. Boys can do what they want to us. Like that is just what we're brought up with. Boys will be boys. Just let them do what you want.
I hate that.
Literally, I feel my heart is pounding. But like throughout high school, it was very much like everybody knew and all the girls knew that if you didn't do stuff with the guys, you got called frigid and you were like teased for being frigid. But as soon as you did anything with guys, you were called a slut and you were like shamed for it. And so you're going through high school like no idea about consent, no idea what the fuck you're meant to do. If you don't do stuff with guys, you're one thing, and if you do stuff with guys, you're another thing. And it was just like, you didn't know any better. You just kind of like let guys get on with what they wanted to do with you. You had no autonomy of your own fucking body. We still don't. Like, no. Yeah, I'm fucking pointless.
But with what you said then, like you do one thing and you one thing and you do one thing, but guys' value doesn't change. Well, they only go up. Yeah. They only go up when it comes to sex. Like, there's not kind of this same thing about sex like there is with women. Like, their value can only increase. Like, and we see it again, and this will not be the last time that I mention Taylor Swift on this podcast. But this is, like, what she talks about and how she's reported on in the media. Like, when people think of Taylor Swift, they go, oh, she whinges about her ex-boyfriends. And it's like, we don't say that about any other... We don't say that about male artists. We don't... Every male artist talks about relationships. And also, everybody knows Taylor Swift as, oh, she's rattled half of Hollywood. Like, people talk about this stuff, and it's like, no one talks about how many women that male artists have slept with. Why is she held to a different standard? And again, like, that's something that people say, oh, you know, it's a really bad example for young girls when she's with a different man all the time. And it's like, why is that a bad example for young girls? But Leonardo DiCaprio isn't being held to the same account for young men because his acting ability is separate from his personal life.
Yeah.
Like,
this is across the board from birth, is women are held to a completely different standard to men. They are born with less worth, they're born with less respect, they're born with higher standards. And like, as young girls, we're taught, like, it's known that like women do develop quicker than boys, but it's like, you know, it's like make accommodation, make room for the boys to do what they want to do. And like, I heard this guy on a podcast, and it was like a woman saying about patriarchy and a guy saying how it didn't exist. And he was basically saying like, when you look at statistics of boys in education, they're not getting as good results as girls. No one's talking about that. And she's like, boys have so much more access to like education and things, and the same education as girls. And so she was like, so it's interesting to me that, you know, you're saying that boys are impacted more by education, but yet when you look at politics and law and tech and all of these fields, they're heavily male dominated. So why is it that if women are actually smarter and getting better results than men in school, they're now not in those higher up positions? And he was just a bit like, yeah. Like, because,
but like, and like, I know from like, I mean, I'm not saying it's all like young boys, but I went to an all girls grammar school, and like, we didn't really have lesson disruption. We just cracked on with our lessons, like, and it was just like chill. Like, girls they couldn't really be bothered engaging, some of them, but like, you just get your head down and doodle. That was the worst of it. Or people really wanted to engage. Like, I remember loving my GCSEs. I loved everything I studied, and that was the vibe in my school. Dougie went to a boys' grammar school, and he was like, oh, we were just chucking chairs about, you talking about your teacher's tits, you know, like that. And again, it's that whole like, maybe that's the difference. And it's that, again, boys will be boys analogy. Like when you said about accommodating, it's that quote where it's like, we always heard as young girls, boys are going to develop slower than you, so make allowances for them. But nobody ever said to boys, girls are going to develop quicker than you, so look up to them as signs of being leaders.
Exactly, because we're never seen as leaders. And like, even now, like my niece and nephew, so my nephew is older, my niece is younger, and you know, my nephew will say things like about being faster than the girls or stronger than the girls. Like, always will make a comment about like something, but like, girls can be strong too. Or like my niece recently, she was like going, look at my muscles, and like putting her arms up going, muscles. She's only 3. She's like, muscles. And she's like, I'm big and strong like the boys. And you sit right down there, Missy, and let me tell you what patriarchy is. But it's like, you know, when you're 2 years old with a t-shirt on you saying like daddy's little princess, or you're a boy and you've got like, you know, I'm going to be an astronaut, I'm big and strong and powerful. Like, we're taught so early on, and I'm hoping that the people listening to this can find how patriarchy has impacted them, and like the clothes they wore, or the way that they were, or how they've been raised, or comments made by teachers, or like, you know, were you pushed to take certain GCSEs over others, or like, you know, like it shows up. Patriarchy seeps into everything. Yeah.
And you know what, again, like, I think I was so, obviously we're all exposed to it because, you know, schooling isn't the only thing that we're exposed to, but again, in my schooling, I was so fortunate with the teachers that I had, because I had some incredible female, like strong female women around me in school in leadership positions. But the men that were teaching in that school, probably the nature of it being an all girls, quite academic school, like, were pushing us into different, like, I had, and you know what, I will actually say it was a male teacher, so this is my claim to fame on my academia. I got full marks in my design technology GCSE. But my male teacher was like, you have to pursue this. You could be incredible in this field. Like, if you want to, you should pursue this. And I remember going to like a conference thing, and it was just all lads, and I was just like, God, I didn't really want to do that. And I wasn't aware of any of this stuff at the time, like patriarchy or like any of this. And it was actually a female teacher that was just like, it's not worth pursuing that. Go and do English. It's not worth your time. But again, because she'd obviously seen the kind of timeline of it, and I guess subconsciously,
about it.
I just
because we
thought,
do internalize this stuff. Like, women as well internalize these beliefs about themselves, and this shows up then in like diet culture and body image and our self-worth, and whether we apply for jobs or whether we advocate for ourselves in healthcare. Like, we internalize patriarchal system beliefs. So, you know, women aren't worth as much as men, women need to look a certain way, women's appearance matters most. Like, all of these things are from patriarchy.
And like, imagine, like, I always think this, I guess this is why it burns my head out now, and again, like the nature of kind of why I do what I do with coaching now, and I'm not like gonna sit here and help someone just lose fat because they fancy losing fat. Like, because for me, I'm at this position where I'm like, we have been, how many minutes, hours, days, months, years of our lives are we going to waste as women changing our bodies, worrying about beauty, skincare, fucking Botox and all of this? Like, that, what could you be doing with that brain space? Like, I got to a point in my life, like, don't get me wrong, like, I've had a boob job, I've had Botox before, but I got to a point where I was like, there's other shit I can be doing with this brain space. Like, I don't care. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly the same. Like, not boob jobs and Botox, but like once you're out of that headspace, you then see how much more headspace you have. Like, there's no way I'd be doing like the amount of adventures that I am, or working on like my human rights course, or doing this podcast with you, because I was so consumed by food and my body and calories, and I was like tired and cold and hungry and exhausted, because that was like my focus for so long. And that's where they want our focus. They like, we are taught from a very young age that what matters most is how we look, and how we look for men. That is an internalized thing that we carry with us.
It's wild because it's like these things just pop up, don't they, in your head when you just think, God, that was said to me. Or, you know, like the way when a woman has like a little girl, and it's like people will constantly be like, beautiful, she's beautiful little girl, and it's just like that she can be so much fucking more than beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Like, I always find that offensive. But like, I remember my nan said to me, and again, it's just because she's nearly 90 now, it's just a lifetime's worth of this. Someone that we know, like it was actually my ex's new partner, we're all like still in contact. She passed away from breast cancer a few years ago, and the first thing my nan said to me when I spoke about it was she pretty?
Okay, that is awful.
As if, but she doesn't realise, like, that is just that, as if her life had more value. Mm-hmm. And it was sadder because, again, we see it in media. If somebody passes away, like this is really dramatic, but there was a girl a couple of years ago about where we lived that was shot on Christmas Eve, and she was stereotypically very beautiful, you know, like extensions, long blonde hair, like, and the headlines were all centered around how devastating it was because it's beautiful. What, can't remember her name, and that is unfortunately like that a life is worth more if they look a certain way, or that it's more devastating if she was beautiful, or all of this. And it's because media has just ingrained that into us, that's where women's value is. And unfortunately, that's in these horrific circumstances, that's how it shows up.
I know somebody who took their baby for their first like baby weigh-in check-in thing, and the nurse said, "Oh, she's not anorexic, is she?" About the baby. About a fucking baby with like the normal baby fat.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah.
But oh my God, like the fact of comment on that, like saying that anyway, but then comparing it to like an eating disorder, like, oh, I think I would have punched her in the face.
Awful, like so bad. But like, that just shows that woman has totally ingrained then, like, to see a certain thing, feel a certain way, and can just say that, like, in healthcare as well, like a nurse. It's absolutely disgusting. But
and you hear that a lot, unfortunately, with clients that'll talk about, like, pregnant clients that'll say, you know, like with midwives and stuff, and comments that they make that are just so inappropriate about mum's scale weight, about, you know, anything, like, and you just think, like, how, like, it, again, like you say, in healthcare, which unfortunately, as we know within the coaching role, is like you spend half your life fighting on the ingrained beliefs of people that are automatically in a position of authority. Well, the doctor said, well, the nurse said, and it's like, but then they can say these things and just be taken as like, it just goes right in.
Yeah. I don't even know which one to tackle next, but
they all blend each other.
Yeah, we have kind of covered a lot of like the juicy big ones. A post that you made on the Woman Up podcast that I really liked was like the pyramid on gender-based violence, and I wanted to kind of highlight that as well, on how it kind of starts, because it's like, people don't often see the link of like the murder of a woman coming from like a patriarchal system, and it is. So like at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got like comments that are sexist, homophobic, transphobic, racist, misogynistic. There's female objectification, so viewing women as sexual objects, the boys will be boys narrative, patriarchy, all of that on the bottom row of this pyramid,
which gets dismissed.
Yes.
So easily.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's just like, that's, that's just is what it is. That's society. He's just a bloke. He's an old guy. He just does that. Boys will be boys. It's shrugged off. We forget and ignore these things.
Yeah.
The comment of a girl being frigid in high school, or being a slut.
Oh.
Minnie.
Oh, sorry. It was the door, I think. 1 second. We'll edit this bit out.
That's fine.
It was just the door. Come here, Minnie. Come here. Come here. Come here. It was just the postman. It's okay. Come on. It's all right. Come on. I know you're protecting me. I know. We're good. What time is it? 11:47. I'll just make a note because we can edit that bit out.
Okay.
11:47. I'll work out how many minutes it is.
Yeah.
Go on.
So yeah, all those easily dismissed things that we just shrug off, and then we're into the next part of the pyramid, where it's like traditional gender roles, glass ceilings, rigid gender stereotypes, which we've not even talked about today. But obviously, the patriarchy narrative is that strict, rigid gender roles of woman in the kitchen, man providing, and heteronormative.
Yeah.
Then up from there on the pyramid, there's harassment, threats, verbal abuse, non-consensual touch, and coercive control. Which
you know what? It's so, you think you recognise this stuff. You think that's really obvious, but when you think about how those two little segments link together, like I can think, and I've spoken to you about this before, like a relationship that I was in the past, where when I was making the transition into going self-employed, where I stepped out and he was like, I'll take care of the bills while you go through this transition, you build up your business and your income's a little bit less. That put me in a really, really vulnerable position, because that relationship actually wasn't healthy, and that then meant that I didn't have any financial freedom. It became easier for things to happen in that relationship because I didn't have the financial freedom to then get myself out of that, and it had to be putting myself in a very kind of, I'm not going to say shameful situation, but it felt like that because that's what was keeping me there, of me turning up to my parents in the middle of the night and saying, can you take me back in? Because that's the only option. And it is when you have those kind of like traditional gender roles and the woman doesn't have as much financial freedom, things like coercive control and stuff like this can just grow roots.
Yeah, and a lot of women don't realise it until it's way, way down the line. Or, I've got a lot of friends who will look back at past relationships now, but having not even realised that it was abuse, because they just weren't aware of it. There's what was that new Blake Lively film? It Ends With Us. That's a really good film of showing how subtle it can be and how easily it just can be passed off as like, no, you're overthinking things or whatever. So I'd recommend watching that film.
And again, my nan is one for, again, just a generation of she'll be like, well, these women that are in these sorts of relationships, why don't they just leave? And it's like, that just shows the lack of understanding of probably a lot of society who haven't been in that situation, of how it's just not that simple. And also it's very rarely, I think, when I really like that film as well for a similar reason, because I think in a lot of films it's depicted as like he's an obvious villain, like somebody that is like the husband that is abusing the wife. He's really, really obvious. He's not a nice person. But the way that they I can't remember his name, but the way that he was portrayed was like, no, he had the good job, he was the nice guy, and you know what, they had a great time outside of those moments. That's what makes it harder to decipher.
Yeah, and when you hear about women who have been murdered or women that have been abused or whatever, when people are talking about the man, they'll be like, he was a nice guy, he was a good guy, I can't believe he's done this, he just seemed like a normal guy. Yeah, because it is just normal. They're not freakish monsters that have grown out of the dump. They're men. They are normal men.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the next section of the pyramid gets to physical assault, sexual assault, rape, emotional abuse, financial abuse, and then the top of the pyramid is murder. And so I love this pyramid because it just shows how those bottom sections are so easily dismissed that men then get away with that into the next section, and then when they get away with that into the next section, all the way up until a woman's life is taken, which one every 10 to 11 minutes a woman is murdered by a family member or partner. Every 10 minutes in the world a woman is killed by a partner.
That it's absolutely wild. We can't even comprehend that, how much of a regular occurrence that is. But it is this case. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It's when you look at the circumstances surrounding it, it is a cultural thing. It's things that have been accepted, and then, like you say, it's nudging further and further and further. And what we get is like, yeah, the young boy that makes a comment and you call them out and they say, calm down, it was just a joke. But which is always a defence for bad behaviour.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's like never a joke. You're fucked up. But do you remember the WhatsApp group that they found the police officer that had murdered Sarah Everard? There was a WhatsApp group, and they would call him nicknames like the creepy.
They called him the rapist.
Yeah, the rapist and the creepy whatever guy and da-da-da. And it was like, oh, so all those jokes have then like she unfortunately just highlighted that pyramid, like. Yeah. And I think that's why that case just became so big. And unfortunately, it takes those big profile cases for people to actually see the bigger picture.
Yeah, and it's horrendous. And I think, is it a government project? I'm going to find out what it is. But have you seen, obviously, the new adverts that are coming out at the moment? And it starts with a guy being like, oh, I catcalling someone. And he goes, it's just a joke. It was just a comment. And then it takes you up the pyramid. And it's like, oh, I'll send it to you. The comment gets more intense, and it was like, then it turns into violence, and it basically is highlighting, and at the end it's got a phrase where it's like encouraging young men to call their friends out, which is a really, really good campaign, because it just highlights exactly the change that we need. We need the change in, don't fucking say that to her, what you're doing. Yeah. Like, we need it to not be cool to catcall a woman on a night out or whatever, and you know, the lads to call each other out for it. That is exactly what needs to happen. It's not waiting until it's rape or it's murder. It's starting at the grassroots and changing the culture around men. Absolutely. Towards women.
Exactly. And then when you've got a president who is a convicted rapist saying things like grab her by the pussy and like you can do what you want to women, is what he said. Like, you're literally undoing so much work and causing so much damage.
Yeah, and in that I saw another thing as well, that he was, it must have been like years ago, and he was sponsoring a pageant and under like the Trump campaign, and he was saying about how, like, oh, it's great because when you're the sponsor you can pretend you're checking things backstage and all the women are like getting changed, but no one questions you because you're a sponsor. And it's like it was basically a juxtaposition of you think you're making bathrooms safer, because again, about the trans rhetoric that they're like weaponizing. You've chosen him to make bathrooms safer for your children, for your daughters, quote unquote. He is the problem, kind of thing. Like, it's like that is the rhetoric that you're apparently afraid of, you know?
Yeah, it's. I got into it a bit with this woman online, which I shouldn't have done. I think I told you about it. I was like, I never...
Famous last words.
...ever comment on someone's post, and then I did, because it was like the day after Trump got in. I was like, you are a fucking moron. But like...
Yeah, why?
So she sees trans women as male, and she voted for Trump because she wants safety for her daughter in women's bathrooms. Safety from men. So I'm like... The problem here, you think, is trans women that are quote unquote men. You don't see the problem is...
The problem is men.
Like, it's just baffling to me that they just don't see that at all. They're like, no, it's trans.
And that's the thing.
But you think a trans person is what?
And that's what I always like. That's my argument with everybody when I try and have this conversation, is like that exactly. But it's kind of like like you say, like men are actually the problem, but they also don't need to pretend to be a trans person to commit crimes against women.
Yeah,
like,
man doesn't need to.
That won't happen. Like, if a man wanted to do something to a woman, he would just do it. We see it every single day. Yes. Like, he would not go to the effort of pretending he was trans to get into the woman's changing room and do it. Like, that's not. And again, we've just remembering that, like, we are obviously talking about people that are different to the heteronormative stereotypes to make space for everybody. But remember that, like, you are like fearing like 1% of the population. Like, they are making out to you that like trans people are this massive issue, and it's like, how many trans people do you actually know? Like, it's just making sure that everybody feels included, but it's like in people's brains a switch goes off that they think that all of a sudden, like, women's changing rooms are going to be full of men. Like, it's just, that's not what is going to happen, but that's what they think, that's what they want you to think is going to happen.
Because that's what gets pushed, and that's what, you know, those Facebook groups are sharing, and the media is sharing, and it's what is being driven into us if that's the kind of content that you're consuming. Because what they're not talking about is the fucked up patriarchal system what we live in. Hence why we started the podcast.
And it's like the issue is always men. Like, change the culture around men so that they don't pretend to be trans women and rape women.
Yeah, I know. I say this all the time. I'm like, if lesbians were out here murdering and raping and harassing people, I would be like, right, ladies, we've got to sort this out. Like, come on. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, but men seem to get defensive and be like, no, it's not us, and deflect. And that, we're never going to get an equal society while men keep deflecting.
No. And it's like, again, like we said, it's if what I get with it, if I guess a guy has listened to any of this and taken personal offence, it's like the only people that would listen and take personal offence to this stuff is if you notice that behaviour in yourself and feel called out. If you are a man who is wanting equality, who is not misogynistic, who doesn't see women as lesser value, nothing of what we said today should make you burn or feel like you've been seen, because that isn't within you already. Or if it does, that's a bit of a sign to go, oh shit, like, am I engaging in that behaviour without realising?
And that's like a hard thing to recognise and realise, because I know guys who have come forward and apologised to my friends later in life, having not realised their behaviours and actions were not okay, because boys will be boys. They didn't know any better at that time, and now they do, and they have come back and apologised, and that takes a lot, and it takes work, and it takes recognition, but a lot of guys don't want to see it and recognise that what they've done has impacted and not been, good.
Yeah, but we also need to have that culture where people can do that. I think, we spoke about this in different contexts, like privately, about like cancel culture and stuff. And I think this is why we need to have, people need to be able to learn and apologise from their behaviour. Now, I'm not saying Greg Wallace can go, oh, I'm sorry I got caught, let me keep my job, sorry, that's enough, let me crack on, because that isn't an actual, I've realised I've done something wrong, and I'm sorry I've been caught, please don't change my life for it. But we need to have a space where people can go, oh, I recognise that's wrong, I'm going to apologise for that, and that apology be welcomed with open arms, rather than you've done something wrong and you're being shut down forever, because then people have no incentive to change and want to then integrate to be part of a better society. You're pushing people further apart.
I guess I agree, but also I think there'll be a lot of people where something will have happened to them where, had their abuser or whoever apologised, they don't feel that they could accept that with...
There's a spectrum.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, you're right, and also can completely understand why somebody would be like, no, I don't feel I can forgive for that.
I think if it's on the end of that spectrum, like you say, where it is like abuse, like in terms of it's very much changed the trajectory of someone's life and really caused them a lot of damage. Like, of course, there's levels to that, and by all means, an apology is not going to take that away. But I think, like,
I know
on the grassroots level, maybe
to
acknowledge their wrongdoing behaviour definitely on a grassroots level, because I think, like, culturally, like you say, men don't like to admit they're wrong. Like a lot of men are like patriarchal. So I think on a grassroots level of culture, to be able to be called out for something and then given an opportunity to correct, realise, move closer towards helping the cause is a positive thing. But like you say, the further you go up that pyramid, the more damage is done, the more an apology is not going to suffice for that. And I completely agree.
And I was just thinking then about, I think this was from Sarah Everard, or maybe it was from the Me Too movement, where men were starting to ask, like, okay, well, what do we do then? And people were saying, like, cross over the street at night. This one always stands out for me, because it's like, it went two ways. Either men were like, right, if that's one thing I can do to help a woman feel safe at night is just cross the street, then I'm going to do it. And then on the other side, there was men like, why the fuck should we have to cross the road to make women feel more safe? I'm not a rapist. Why should I bother doing that? And it's like, you've got two very different things going on here. Like, why does you crossing the road to make a woman feel safe like negatively impact your life at all? Whereas like, and the other thing is when men are like, I'm not a rapist, so I don't need to do anything. It's like,
No, we need
okay,
you.
yeah, no, we need you. But like, a woman doesn't know you're not a rapist because
Yeah.
of the level of violence that we see. And it's like, even when violence isn't happening to us, we have to stay alert to it. And that is ingrained in us. Like, don't be out past dark, don't go on a run by yourself, like, be home by a certain time, only follow the street lights back. Like, we all know, like, the key in between the fingers, like, all of those things that came about with Sarah Everard that we all just do. Men were starting to realise that we had to do that, but a lot of men were like, well, I'm not a rapist, so I'm... But it's like, okay, if I put you in a room with 500 snakes and one of those was poisonous, like, how confident would you be in like swarming around in that? No, you wouldn't. Like,
You wouldn't,
you'd
yeah.
be conscious of every snake in that room because you don't
Yeah.
know which one's going to bite you, and that is a woman's life every day.
Yeah, and it sounds dramatic, but it is. We just live with it, so it's like it's just ingrained in us. Like, and I think I put a story up, like a selfie from my run the other night, and then I literally looked at it, and then I just edited the picture with like the reality of the picture because I thought, wow, that looks like, hey, I've just been on a run, and like, yeah, fine. But the reality of it was, I was wearing a hydration vest even though I was doing a 5K and I didn't need it, but it meant that I could have my key with me. Even though Dougie was in, I didn't need to take a key, but I'm taking a key because that's the only thing I can use as a weapon legally in this country. Like, so my key is coming with me, and it's got a rape whistle on it. That's the reason I was wearing it. It was literally for protection. I literally run the most boring route up and down the same street lit part by where we live, because otherwise I'm not really running because we get like 5 hours of daylight. So like I run up and down there. It's really, really boring, but it's my only option. And I never have, my AirPods are always on really, really low, so I can just about hear the beat, and they're always on transparency. And like that's the reality of
That's just the
going
norm.
for a run. Yeah, and
that is
it's like,
just the norm.
saying that to Dougie, and he was like, it's mad because it's like if I went out for a run I wouldn't think about any of that, and I'd just have my music on, be going out for a run. He said at worst I'd be worried about maybe being mugged, but not really that much.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So then the impact of that is like either women then don't, so that impacts our health. It then impacts our mental health, physical health, social health, all of those things. This, I'm just hoping that the people listening to this are starting to piece together how you going for a run without headphones in is because of the system which we live in.
yeah,
And that
exactly.
like, is how it shows up in day-to-day life. Obviously, the bigger, more dramatic things like pay gaps and pain gaps and all of that are like big, but then whittle it right down to how it impacts you each day. Dieting, running without headphones in, not going on a walk with friends because it's dark after 8. Like,
And I have clients who are in that very real situation of like, I've got clients that are really struggling with their health, that are trying to make healthy changes, that work really long hours and shifts in the winter, and they're like, I'm not going to go out after dark. Like, I'm just not going to go for a walk. And like, that is, therefore, they are really, really struggling with things like weight management and that kind of thing. And they feel like shit in the evening because they haven't seen fresh air or daylight and they haven't moved. And then they make, less healthy choices, and then they feel awful in their mental health, and that is the reality. It's because they don't feel safe to when it's dark, and that's really, really sad.
that is the world in which we live every day. And this is why it just boils my piss when guys are like, because it's like, you don't understand how exhausting it is to have to constantly be on and to think and be one step ahead.
Yeah, and it's yeah, it is exhausting, but that's exactly why we feel like this is so important, because the more aware that you are of it, the more that you can challenge it, the more that you can have these discussions with the people around you and have a ripple effect and challenge things and not automatically subscribe to things that are negatively impact. Of course, there's going to be things I can't control, that I need to, not wear headphones when I go out for a run, but there's certain things we can choose to unsubscribe to, like diet culture, like,
Gender stereotypes.
Curating your body to the male gaze because that's all that your worth is based on. Like, these are things you can intentionally challenge, and that's action that you can take right away.
Yeah, and I think another good episode would be to talk about all the different little like micro-feminist things you can do each week to like add up, or like ways you can woman up each week.
Yeah, 100%. But there's hopefully something you can take from this episode that you can think, how am I going to woman up this week? How am I going to do something that's going to push us in the right direction? Because there will be something that you might think will be tiny, but will make a big shift in your day-to-day life. And that's where it starts.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this for myself, I was like, what small thing can I do this week? And my thing was to default to she, female things. So, like, there was this lizard crawling up my bathroom wall this morning, and I instantly named it Tony. And then I was like, wait, I've defaulted to a man on an animal. Like, I always typically default to male. So I was like, right, I'm gonna call her something else. I called her Tori, because it was like a Tony Tori. This was like an instant, just like, nope, called myself out, changed it. And so even just that, like, we just default everything to men, like, or male,
Yeah.
like firemen and policemen, or like cars even, we should call them a he, or like seeing a dog, we go a he. Like, why don't you start calling yourself out and default to she?
Because actually, biologically, everybody started as a female.
So probably more statistically correct to go with female anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. And like, that is something that I do all the time, is even calling myself out, but intentionally, if somebody else says something, not correcting them, but just using the gender neutral term of like fire officer, police officer, like cabin crew, like we have these terms. It doesn't have to be, oh, a fire she, or people stupid things that people, it's just a gender neutral term, police officer. Like,
Yeah.
it's just use the gender neutral term.
Yeah, and that does take practice, because it is so ingrained in us. All of these things, like, it is so ingrained. It does take like intentional noticing and practice and work and keeping, repeating. Deprogramming. Exactly. And like, yeah, like we said, like, you call yourself out for it, I'll call myself out for it. So it's just like, just little things. What can we do?
Yeah, and little things you'll notice going forward now, hopefully.
Yeah. Great.
Right.
Wow. Hour and a half and off
Let's
this.
decompress. And breathe. Right. Thank you very much for listening, guys. If you found that helpful, please do share it with someone else that you think would find this helpful as well. Please don't forget to subscribe, because you'll be notified, obviously, of our podcast as and when they come out. You're obviously going to be hearing more from us collectively, but we're going to be having some great guests on, talking about their specific areas of expertise that we can't wait to learn from as well. And I'm sure there'll be just some rants in between from each of us independently about whatever we feel like chatting about. So yeah, get yourself subscribed, share it with someone that'll benefit, and we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, we'll see you again soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.